July 1835. Indented Head, Victoria. 3 British settlers sat around a driftwood fire. Steam rose from tin cups of tea into the cold morning air. They were the first white men to set foot on this land in 30 years. They thought they were alone at the edge of the world. Suddenly, the tea tree scrub parted, and something stepped out. He was a giant. 6 feet 6 inches of muscle and bone wrapped in sewn possum skins. His hair hung in matted ropes to his waist, beard thick as winter scrub. In his hands, jagged fighting spears, black with fire-hardened tips. The settlers raised their guns, fingers on triggers. They thought he was a tribal war chief, come to kill them. But the giant didn't attack. He just stared at them with wide, wild blue eyes. He opened his mouth to speak. No words came. He moved his lips, shaped sounds that had no name. His throat had forgotten English, forgotten civilization, forgotten everything except how to survive. Trembling, the giant grabbed his own arm. He rubbed away the dirt, the possum grease, the 30 years of wilderness, and held his forearm out to the firelight. There, faded into pale skin, was a crude blue tattoo. 2 letters, W.B. He whispered a name he hadn't heard in 32 years. A name from another life, another world. William Buckley. The White Savage. But who was this creature? How does a British convict walk out of the bush after 32 years, alive, fluent in a language no white man knew, dressed in the skins of possums he'd killed with his bare hands? And what miracle allowed him to survive in a land that almost killed him in the first 3 months? To understand this impossible story, we have to go back to 1803, to a failed British settlement on the edge of the world, where a 23-year-old convict named William Buckley was about to make a choice that would erase him from history and transform him into a ghost. William Buckley was born tall. Not just tall, enormous. By age 15, he stood a head above grown men, hands like shovels, shoulders built for carrying burdens. In the village of Marton, Cheshire, they called him the Giant Boy. His father was a farmer, poor, bent-backed from years of coaxing crops from rocky soil. When William's mother died, the boy went to live with his grandfather in Macclesfield, a stern man who believed in schooling and discipline. The grandfather apprenticed him to a bricklayer named Robert Wyatt, 15 years old, learning to cut stone and stack mortar in straight lines. Honest work for honest pay. But William Buckley was not built for standing still. At 16, he ran away, joined the Cheshire Militia, then the King's Own Regiment. They needed big men who could carry heavy packs and hold a line. Buckley was perfect. They sent him to Holland, 1799. The war against Napoleon. Buckley stood in formation under the Duke of York, watching cannonballs tear holes in the ranks beside him. The ground shook. The air tasted of gunpowder and copper. Men fell like wheat before a scythe. He survived. Not through skill, through size. A musket ball that would kill a smaller man skimmed off his thick ribs. A bayonet thrust meant for his heart caught only shoulder muscle. When the battle ended, they sent the wounded back to England. Buckley came home a soldier, disciplined, hardened, with scars that would never fully heal. But England had no use for broken soldiers. London, 1802. Buckley found work where he could, manual labor, dock work, bricklaying again when the foreman didn't ask too many questions. But the pay was thin, the rooms were cold, and the city was full of men just like him, soldiers who'd given everything for king and country, then been cast aside like broken tools. She had a bundle wrapped in brown paper. Fine cloth, she said, bolt of expensive fabric. Needed someone to hold it, just for a few days. She'd pay him well. Buckley knew what it was. Stolen. He took it anyway. They found him 3 days later. The cloth was still wrapped, still untouched. Buckley hadn't even sold it, hadn't even looked at it. But the law didn't care about intent. He'd received stolen goods. That was enough. August 1802, Old Bailey. The judge was an old man with a face like crumpled parchment. He barely looked at Buckley when he spoke. "William Buckley, you are found guilty of receiving stolen property. For this crime, you are sentenced to transportation, 14 years, to the penal colony of New South Wales." 14 years, in a land on the other side of the world, a land no convict had ever returned from. Buckley said nothing, just stared at the irons they locked around his wrists, wrists that had held muskets and trowels and killed men in Holland. Now they would carry chains. April 1803, HMS Calcutta. The ship that would carry him to the end of the earth. The hold stank of unwashed bodies and sickness. 200 convicts crammed into a space meant for cargo. Buckley's knees pressed against the man in front of him. His head scraped the ceiling beams. For 8 months, he would live in this floating coffin. They sailed south, through storms that tossed the Calcutta like driftwood, around the Cape of Good Hope, where the sea turned black and men prayed to gods they'd forgotten. Across the Indian Ocean, where sailors whispered about sea monsters and lands where men walked upside down. Buckley didn't pray. He just counted the days, scratched them into the wooden beam above his head with a nail he'd stolen. 143 scratches. And then, land. October 1803. Port Phillip, Victoria. The ship's captain, Lieutenant Colonel David Collins, stood on deck and stared at the shore. This was where they would build the new settlement, houses, farms, a foothold for the British Empire in this strange land. The convicts were brought up from the hold. Buckley stepped onto the deck and felt real sunlight for the first time in 8 months. It burned his eyes. The air tasted wrong, salt and eucalyptus and something wild he couldn't name. He looked at the shore. Dense scrub, gray-green, impenetrable. Beyond it, nothing. No roads, no towns, no churches or taverns or anything resembling civilization. Just wilderness. They rowed to shore in shifts. Buckley's boat scraped onto white sand that squeaked under his boots. He stepped onto the beach of Sullivan Bay and felt the ground shift beneath him. Soft, yielding, nothing like English soil. They called it a settlement. It was a collection of canvas tents and misery. For 3 months, Buckley worked, cutting timber, hauling stone, building the first crude structures that would house the Marines and officers. His back screamed. His hands bled. The sun was different here, fierce, relentless, even in summer. And the land fought them. Flies, thousands of them, in your eyes, in your mouth, in every wound and cut. The water tasted of salt. The soil wouldn't grow crops, and at night they heard things in the scrub. Things that screamed like dying children. Things that laughed like devils. By December, Collins made the decision. This settlement was doomed. They would abandon Sullivan Bay and move the entire expedition to Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, a place where other colonies had already taken root. But for the convicts, Van Diemen's Land meant one thing: hell. Macquarie Harbor, Sarah Island, places where men were worked to death in chain gangs, where flogging was breakfast and starvation was supper. Buckley sat with 3 other convicts in the darkness. One of them, a thin man named Marmon, looked at Buckley with desperate eyes.
"We run. Tonight. Before they load us back on that ship."
Buckley thought of 14 years in chains. 14 years in Van Diemen's Land. 14 years of a life already ended. He looked at the dark scrub, the endless wilderness, the unknown, and nodded. They waited until midnight. 4 men. William Buckley, towering over the others even when crouched. Marmon, the thin one with desperate eyes. A man named Brown. Another called Pye. All of them convicts. All of them staring at the same choice. 14 years in Van Diemen's Land, or death in the wilderness. The guard patrol passed. Marmon touched Buckley's arm. "Now." They ran. Not toward anything, just away. Away from the ships, away from the chains, away from the officers who would work them to death cutting timber for buildings that would be abandoned in 6 months. They crashed through tea tree scrub. Branches whipped their faces. Thorns tore their clothes. Behind them, the settlement grew smaller, just points of orange firelight against the massive darkness of the Australian night. After an hour, they stopped. Marmon was bleeding from a gash across his cheek. Brown's shirt was torn half off. They stood in the darkness, listening to the strange sounds of this alien land. No birds they recognized. No animal calls from England. Just insects. Endless insects. And the distant boom of surf. Pye spoke first, voice shaking.
"Where do we go?"
Buckley looked at the scrub. Endless. Gray-green. Impenetrable. "North," he said. "Away from the bay. Inland." It was a guess. They had no map, no compass, no idea what lay beyond the next ridge. But inland meant away from the settlement, and away was all they had. The first day, they walked. The sun rose behind them, too bright, too hot, too early. By noon, they were drenched in sweat. Their boots, prison issue, thin leather, tore on the rocks. They had no food, no water. Brown found a creek. They drank. The water tasted of iron and tannin.
"How far to anywhere?"
Pye asked. Marmon shook his head. "Collins said there's nothing for 1,000 miles, just bush and savages." "Then we walk 1,000 miles, Buckley said, but his voice didn't sound certain. The second night, they slept under a sky with too many stars. Buckley had seen stars in Holland, in England, in 8 months at sea, but never like this. The constellations were wrong, upside down. Nothing made sense. Pye wouldn't stop talking. "My brother's in London, Spitalfields. He'll be wondering where I am. He'll—" "Shut up," Brown said. "He'll think I'm dead. He'll tell my mother." "Shut up." Something moved in the darkness beyond their fire. Big. They heard branches snap, heavy footfalls. Buckley grabbed a burning stick from the fire, stood. His shadow stretched enormous across the scrub. The sound stopped, then moved away. "What was that?" Marmon whispered. "I don't know." And that was the worst part. In England, you knew what made sounds in the dark. Foxes, deer, dogs. Here, nothing was familiar. The third day, Pye collapsed. They'd been walking since dawn. No food, just water from creeks that tasted wrong. The sun hammered them. The scrub seemed to go on forever, gray-green, monotonous, endless. Pye just stopped, sat down on a rock, looked at his torn boots. "I can't. "Get up," Marmon said. "I can't walk anymore." "You want to die here?" Pi looked at Marmon with empty eyes. "I'm already dead. We all are. We just haven't stopped moving yet." Buckley stood over him, all 6'6" of scar tissue and muscle. He could have picked Pi up, carried him, but they had 50 miles behind them and 1,000 ahead. "Stay if you want," Buckley said. "I'm walking." He turned and kept moving. Behind him, he heard Marmon and Brown arguing with Pi. Heard Pi's voice getting quieter. Then just footsteps. 2 sets. Marmon and Brown caught up. They didn't talk about Pi. That night they sat around a fire smaller than their hope. Brown stared into the flames. "We should go back." "Back?" Marmon said. "Back to what? The chains?" "At least we'd eat. At least we'd live." "You call that living?" Buckley said nothing, just watched the fire, listened to them argue about things that didn't matter anymore. They'd crossed a line. The moment they ran, they stopped being convicts and became something else. Fugitives. Outlaws. Dead men. The only question was how long until they stopped walking. The 4th morning they found the ocean. Not the settlement, just the bay. They'd walked for 4 days and somehow circled back to the coast. Brown started laughing, high-pitched, hysterical. "We're lost! We don't even know which direction we're walking." Marmon sat down hard, put his head in his hands. "I'm going back. I'm turning myself in." He stood and started walking, south, toward where they thought the settlement was. "Marmon!" Brown called. But Marmon didn't turn around, just kept walking until the scrub swallowed him. 2 left. Buckley and Brown stood on the ridge looking at the endless gray-green wilderness. Brown spoke quietly. "What do we do?" Buckley looked at the sun, at the scrub, at the alien sky. "We walk." They walked for 6 more days. Or was it 7? Time stopped making sense. The sun rose and fell. They drank from creeks, ate nothing. Their bodies were consuming themselves. Brown talked less each day. His face turned gray. His eyes sank into his skull. On what might have been the 10th day, he spoke his last words to Buckley. "I'm done, big man. I'm done." Buckley stood over him. Brown wasn't breathing. Just stopped. The heart gave out. Or the will. Maybe they were the same thing. Buckley should have buried him, should have said something. But he had no shovel, no strength, no words that mattered. He took Brown's boots, better than his own, and kept walking. Alone now. Just William Buckley. A giant from Cheshire. A thief. A soldier. A convict. Walking into a wilderness that had already killed 3 men. Walking north. Or south. Or in circles. Walking because stopping meant dying. And he wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. "11 days. Or 12. Or 50. Time had lost meaning. William Buckley walked alone through the gray-green hell of Port Phillip. His lips were cracked and bleeding. His tongue was swollen. His skin had burned, peeled, burned again. He'd stopped sweating 3 days ago. That was bad. He knew that was bad. Hunger wasn't a feeling anymore. It was a presence, a living thing inside him, eating him from within. His body was consuming itself, muscle, fat, anything it could find. He'd tried eating bark. It made him vomit. He'd tried eating leaves. They tasted like poison. He'd found bird eggs once, 3 of them. He ate them raw, shells and all, and threw them up 10 minutes later. He fell. Not dramatically, just his legs stopped working. One moment he was walking, the next he was on his knees, staring at the dirt. "This is it," he thought. "This is where I die." He lay down. The earth was warm. The sun pressed on his back like a hand. He thought of Martin, of his grandfather, of the battlefield in Holland where he should have died the first time. He thought of Brown's face when his heart stopped. Maybe this was justice. Maybe thieves didn't deserve to live. He closed his eyes, and then something. A sound. No, a lack of sound. The insects had gone quiet. Buckley's eyes opened. A shape moved through the scrub, 20 feet away, big, moving on 4 legs. A kangaroo. He'd seen them from the ship, massive creatures that hopped like rabbits but stood tall as men. The sailors had laughed at them, called them devil deer. This one was enormous, 6 feet tall when it stood upright, red-brown fur, thick tail. It looked at Buckley with black eyes that showed no fear. Because Buckley wasn't a threat. He was just a dying thing on the ground. The kangaroo came closer. 10 feet. 5. Buckley's hand found a rock. His fingers closed around it. Every hunter instinct from his childhood screamed, "This is food. This is life. Take it." He hurled the rock. Hit. He'd hit it, but not hard enough. The kangaroo bounded away, disappearing into the scrub in 3 massive leaps. Buckley's one chance at food. Gone. He screamed. No words, just sound, rage at the universe, at God, at this God-forsaken land that wouldn't even let him die quickly. When the scream ended, he had nothing left. He fell forward onto his hands and saw it. A mound of earth, not natural, too deliberate, too shaped. Rocks arranged in a pattern, sticks placed with intention. A grave. Buckley crawled toward it. The mound was small, maybe 5 feet long, covered in dried grass and branches. At one end, a circle of white stones. At the other, a spear. It stood upright in the earth, 7 feet tall. The shaft was dark wood, smooth from handling. The blade was stone, flaked, sharp, lashed to the shaft with what looked like sinew. It had been there a long time. The grass had grown around it. This was someone's grave. Someone had been buried here with their weapon standing guard. Buckley reached for it. He should have left it. He knew that. Even in his half-dead state, he knew this was sacred. But he needed it. He needed a walking stick, a weapon, a tool, something to keep him upright. His fingers closed around the shaft. He pulled. The spear came free from the earth with a whisper of resistance, like a sword from a stone. Buckley stood, using the spear for support. It was perfectly balanced. The weight of it felt right in his hand, familiar, even though he'd never held anything like it. For the first time in days, he stood fully upright. And that's when he heard them. Voices. Not English, not words he recognized, but human, definitely human, coming from the scrub, getting closer. Shapes moved between the trees. Men, naked except for possum skin cloaks, skin dark as the earth, hair long and matted, bodies painted with white clay in patterns Buckley couldn't read, and every one of them carried a spear. Buckley's grip tightened on the spear. This was it. The savages the soldiers had warned about, the warriors who killed trespassers. He was a dead man holding a stolen weapon. He should run. But his legs wouldn't move. He was too weak, too far gone. So he just stood there, a giant white ghost in rags, holding a spear he'd pulled from a grave, facing a circle of warriors who were emerging from the trees. 10 of them, then 20. They stepped out of the scrub and formed a circle around him. But they didn't attack. They just stared. At him. At the spear in his hand. At the grave mound behind him. One of them, an older man with gray in his hair, stepped forward. He looked at Buckley, at the spear, back to Buckley. He spoke. One word. Quiet. Almost reverent. Murrangurk. The word rippled through the circle. Murrangurk. Murrangurk. They weren't looking at him with hostility. They were looking at him with something else. Wonder. Fear. Recognition. The old warrior came closer, reached out, touched Buckley's arm, felt the skin, the bones beneath, the reality of him. Then he looked at the spear again, at the grave, and he fell to his knees. The other warriors dropped too, not all the way, just to one knee, heads bowed, like they were in the presence of something sacred. Buckley stood there, swaying. He didn't understand any of it. He'd stolen a spear from a grave. He was about to die, and these men were kneeling. The old warrior stood again, spoke directly to Buckley. His voice was gentle, almost tender. Murrangurk, he said again. Then more words, a flood of them. The language was liquid, musical, completely incomprehensible, but the tone was unmistakable. Welcome. You're home. We thought you were dead. Buckley's legs gave out. The warriors caught him before he fell, lowered him gently to the earth. Hands touched his face, his arms, his chest, not violently, but with something like concern. One of them brought a skin bag. Water. They poured it between his cracked lips. Buckley drank. The water tasted like life. He tried to speak, tried to ask what was happening, why they weren't killing him, but his throat wouldn't work. Only a croak came out. The old warrior touched his shoulder, spoke again. The word Murrangurk repeated. They lifted him, 6 of them, working together, hoisting his enormous frame like he weighed nothing. Someone placed the spear across his chest, the spear he'd taken from the grave. They carried him into the scrub. Buckley looked up at the canopy passing overhead, at the faces of the men carrying him, at the spear resting on his chest. He didn't understand. He'd stolen from a grave, and they were treating him like he'd come back from the dead. Through the trees, he saw smoke, firelight, heard voices, women, children, dogs. A camp. They were taking him to their camp. And as consciousness began to slip away, from exhaustion, from shock, from his body finally allowing itself to rest, Buckley heard that word again. Murrangurk. Whoever Murrangurk was, Buckley realized, he was now. He closed his eyes. For the first time since the escape, he felt safe. Not because he understood, but because these men, these savages, were carrying him like he mattered, like he was one of them, like he'd come home. Buckley woke to the smell of smoke. Not the acrid smoke of burning scrub, something else.
wood smoke, cooking, life. He opened his eyes. Above him, bark, woven branches, a shelter. Not a tent, not a building, something in between. Around him, voices, the same liquid language from yesterday. Or was it yesterday? Time felt strange. A woman entered, old, gray-haired. Her face was a map of wrinkles. She carried a wooden bowl and set it beside him without speaking. She stared at him, not hostile, just examining, like he was a puzzle. She reached out, touched his beard, tugged it gently, testing if it was real. Then she laughed, a dry, crackling sound. She said something in that musical language and left. Buckley sat up slowly. His body screamed, every muscle, every joint. But he was alive. The bowl contained something. Stew, maybe. Chunks of meat in liquid. Roots. Things he didn't recognize. He drank it anyway. It tasted like dirt and fat and salvation. He ate until the bowl was empty. Licked it clean. His stomach cramped immediately. Too much, too fast, but he didn't care. Food. Real food. He was alive. When he stepped outside, the camp was already awake. 20 bark shelters arranged in a loose circle, smoke rising from cooking fires, women working, children running, dogs, thin, dingo-looking things, nosing through scraps. And everywhere, people staring at him. They stopped what they were doing, turned, stared, not with fear exactly, more like awe. The way you'd stare at something that shouldn't exist but does. A child pointed, said something. An adult hushed her. The old warrior, the one who'd first touched him, approached. He smiled, spoke that word again. Murrangurk. Then more words, a whole stream of them. Patient, like explaining something to a child. Buckley just stared. I don't understand. The warrior pointed, to himself, to Buckley, to the spear, Buckley's spear now apparently, leaning against the bark shelter. He touched Buckley's chest, said, Murrangurk, again, then pointed to himself and said something else, a different name. Repeated it slowly. Buckley tried to repeat it, failed. The sounds didn't match his mouth. Some younger men nearby laughed. Not cruelly, just amused. The way you'd laugh at a baby trying to talk. One of them mimicked Buckley's attempt. The others laughed harder. The old warrior frowned at them, said something sharp. They stopped. Then he turned back to Buckley and tried again. The days blurred. Buckley learned that the old warrior was called something he eventually managed to pronounce as close to Wombalano. Or that's what it sounded like to English ears. Wombalano seemed to have appointed himself Buckley's teacher, his guide, his father? The relationship was unclear, but Wombalano was patient. He taught Buckley words, simple ones first. Fire, water, food, spear. Buckley's tongue struggled. English mouths weren't built for these sounds. But he tried. Yun. Fire. Burung. Sun. Karabul. Walk. The children helped. They found it hilarious, this giant white ghost man who couldn't speak properly. They'd hold up objects and say the words slowly, like teachers. When Buckley got it right, they'd cheer. When he got it wrong, they'd dissolve into giggles. But they kept teaching. At night, they gathered around fires. Wombalano would tell stories, long ones. His voice would rise and fall, becoming different characters.
The others would lean in, react, laugh, gasp. Buckley understood maybe 1 word in 10, but he watched. The stories were performances. Sometimes others would join in, acting out parts, battles, hunts, journeys. One night, Wambalano told a story that made everyone go quiet. He pointed to the spear, Buckley's spear, and said, "Murrangurk," over and over. An old woman started crying. She looked at Buckley with such raw grief and hope that it made his chest hurt. She reached toward him, whispered, "Murrangurk," then turned away, sobbing. Wambalano touched Buckley's shoulder, spoke gently. The message was clear. "She thinks you're him, the man who died. Let her believe." Buckley wanted to tell them, to explain. He wasn't Murrangurk. He was William Buckley, a thief from Cheshire, a convict. But he had no words, and even if he did, would it matter? They'd saved his life, fed him, sheltered him. If they needed him to be Murrangurk, then maybe that's who he'd be. Wambalano began teaching him to see the land. Not just look at it, see it. He'd stop suddenly, kneel, pointed marks in the dirt that Buckley couldn't even see. Tracks. Not just what animal, but when, how many, where it was going. He showed Buckley plants, which ones you could eat, which ones would kill you. He dug up yams, massive roots that tasted like potatoes, but better. He found water in places where Buckley saw only dry creek beds, showed him how to dig down, how the earth remembered moisture. He taught Buckley to read the birds. Their calls meant water nearby, or danger, or just morning. Buckley learned slowly, but he learned. The land that had tried to kill him was becoming understandable. Not friendly, never friendly, but knowable. They taught him to hunt, or tried to. Buckley had size and strength, but he moved like a cow in the bush. Loud, clumsy. His feet crashed through every twig. The first time they took him hunting, he stepped on a branch. The wallaby they'd been stalking for an hour bounded away. The others just looked at him. One of the younger men, someone Buckley mentally called Smiling Man because he was always grinning, said something that made the others laugh. Buckley didn't need translation. It was clearly, "The ghost man hunts like a wounded buffalo." But they kept teaching. Days turned to weeks. Buckley's throws got straighter, his feet got quieter. His eyes started seeing what theirs saw. One morning, he threw his spear, Murrangurk's spear, and it stuck in a tree. Not the center, but solid contact. The young warriors cheered like he'd killed a whale. The women tolerated him. At first, they'd avoided him, whispered when he passed. But as weeks went on, they grew bolder. One woman, older, stern-faced, began teaching him things. How to weave baskets from reeds. How to prepare certain roots so they weren't poison. She laughed at his attempts. His hands were too big, too clumsy. But she kept teaching. The children had no fear at all anymore. They'd climb on him, use him as a tree, pull his beard, ask him to lift them, and he would, hoisting 3 at once while they shrieked with joy. One little girl, maybe 4 years old, appointed herself his shadow. She followed him everywhere, corrected his pronunciation with the absolute certainty only a 4-year-old could have. When he got a word wrong, she'd put her tiny hands on her hips and repeat it until he got it right. She was a better teacher than most adults. One night, Wambalano told Buckley about Murrangurk. By now, Buckley could understand perhaps half of what was said, enough to piece together meaning. Murrangurk had been Wambalano's nephew, a great hunter, strong, brave, killed in a fight with a neighboring tribe 3 years ago. His mother, the old woman who'd cried, had never stopped grieving.
When Wambolano found Buckley holding Murrangurk's spear, standing at Murrangurk's grave, with skin the color of spirits, it was a gift from the ancestors. Murrangurk returned. Wambolano touched Buckley's arm, spoke slowly, making sure Buckley understood. Murrangurk, you, here, stay. Buckley sat in the silence. He wasn't Murrangurk. He never would be. But Wambolano needed him to be. The old woman needed him to be. Maybe the whole tribe needed him to be. And Buckley, William Buckley, the thief, the convict, the man who should have died alone in the wilderness, needed them. He looked at the old warrior, at the fire, at the camp beyond, his camp now, and he nodded. Murrangurk, he said, not a question, a statement. Wambolano smiled, not the smile of someone fooled, the smile of someone who'd found something lost. That night, for the first time since leaving England, William Buckley felt something he'd forgotten existed. Home. Not the place, the people. He was Murrangurk now, and Murrangurk was home. The years passed like water, not in days or months, in seasons, in hunts, in ceremonies. Buckley learned to navigate by feel rather than understanding. 1 year became 2, 2 became 5, 5 became 10. And somewhere in those years, William Buckley stopped being William Buckley. He learned to hunt. Not just throw a spear, truly hunt. To read the land like Wambolano had taught him. To move through scrub without sound. To think like prey. His first solo kill was a wallaby. Not large, but clean. One throw, through the heart. The young warriors who'd once laughed at his clumsiness witnessed it. They emerged from concealment, faces split with pride. Murrangurk, they called. Not mockery, respect. That night they sang songs about the ghost man's first kill. Buckley sat by the fire and listened to himself become mythology. The language became his, not just words he'd memorized, the whole structure of thought. The way Wathaurong shaped the world through speech. He dreamed in it. One morning, he woke and realized he'd forgotten the English word for sky. Just couldn't find it in his mind. Wadawurrung, he thought. And that was enough. The children who'd once taught him now begged him for stories. He'd become a storyteller, learning the old tales from elders, adding his own flair, making the children shriek with delight when he acted out the scary parts. His favorite was about a giant who came from across the sea and learned to be human. The children thought it was ancient wisdom. Only Buckley knew it was autobiography. They taught him the corroborees, sacred ceremonies, dance and song and story woven together, bodies painted in white clay, ironically making everyone else as pale as Buckley. He learned the dances, the foot-stomping rhythms, the songs that went on for hours, telling the history of the land itself. When he danced, he wasn't performing. He was remembering. Ancestral memory that wasn't his, but had become his anyway. The songs taught him the land in ways walking never could. Every hill had a story. Every creek had a name. Every rock was a frozen ancestor. The country stopped being wilderness and became home. He learned the politics. The Wathaurong weren't alone. Other tribes lived nearby. Some were allies, some were enemies. The relationships shifted like weather. Buckley's size made him valuable in disputes. When rival groups met to settle conflicts, he stood with the Wathaurong warriors. Silent, massive, a walking threat. Once, a warrior from a rival clan challenged him directly, pointed his spear.
shouted something Buckley barely understood, insults about ghosts not being real warriors. Buckley stepped forward, didn't raise his spear, didn't need to. He just stood there, 6'6", shoulders like boulders, scars from Holland mixing with scars from Australia. The challenger looked up at him, and up, and up. Someone laughed, then another. The tension broke like fever. The challenger stepped back, grinning sheepishly. No fight needed. Message received. The ghost man was real, and he was Wathaurong. The women accepted him eventually. Not quickly, not easily. But over years he proved himself. Brought meat when hunting was good. Helped carry water when the creek was far. Learned which plants the women valued and brought them back when he found them. One woman in particular, someone he thought of as laughing eyes for her constant amusement at the world, began seeking him out. She'd tease him about his height, his pale skin that never quite tanned, his terrible basket weaving. Then, one day, she wove him a possum skin cloak. Massive, made from dozens of possum skins carefully sewn together. The inside was soft as clouds. The outside was decorated with ochre designs, stories from the land. It represented months of work. In Wathaurong culture, Buckley had learned, such a gift meant something. He accepted it, wore it. And that night, Wambalano told him, grinning, that he'd just gotten married. What? But Wambalano was already walking away, laughing. The woman, her name was something close to Parworn in English sounds, moved her belongings into his shelter that night. She didn't ask, just did it. And Buckley, who'd survived battlefields and starvation and losing himself in wilderness, was utterly terrified. Parworn found his nervousness hilarious. She touched his beard, still a source of fascination for everyone, and laughed. Then she taught him what came next, with patience and humor, and a confidence that made Buckley understand why she'd chosen him. They had children, a son first, then a daughter, then another daughter. Buckley watched them grow with wonder. They looked like both worlds, his pale coloring mixing with Parworn's darkness, English size with Wathaurong features. They spoke only Wathaurong. He never taught them English. Why would he? He barely remembered it himself. His son demanded to learn spear throwing at age 5. Buckley taught him, crouching beside the boy, showing him grip and stance and release, just like Wambalano had taught him. The boy's first successful throw, hitting a tree from 10 paces, made Buckley's chest swell with pride he didn't know he could feel. His daughters were fierce. They climbed trees the boys were afraid of, caught fish with their bare hands, argued with anyone who told them what they couldn't do. Parworn said they got that from him. Buckley wasn't sure that was a compliment. Sometimes, late at night, Buckley would sit by the fire and try to remember England. Martin, the stone cottages, rain, green fields. The memories came like smoke. There, but not solid. Fragments. He'd try to count in English, get to 7 and forget 8. He'd try to remember his mother's face, see only shadows. He'd try to remember the name of the street where he was arrested. Nothing. Just the word London floating in empty space. Parworn would find him like this, sometimes. She'd sit beside him without asking questions, put her hand on his shoulder. She knew he came from somewhere else. Everyone knew. The ghost man story. But to her, he was just Murrangurk, her husband, her children's father, the giant who brought home wallabies and told terrible jokes and still couldn't weave a basket to save his life. "This is home," he'd say in Wathaurong.
Yes, she'd answer. And he'd believe it. More years passed. 10 became 15. 15 became 20. 20 became 30. Buckley became an elder himself. Young warriors sought his counsel. Children who weren't his called him uncle with the same respect he'd once given Wumbalano. Wumbalano had grown old. His hair was white now, his step slower, but his eyes still sharp. One evening they sat together by a fire, just the two of them, like that first night years ago. Wumbalano looked at Buckley, smiled. "I told them you would stay," Wumbalano said. "They didn't believe. I believed." "Why?" Buckley asked. "Because Murrangurk was always stubborn, never knew when to quit." They laughed, the way men laugh when they've survived something together and come out the other side intact. Buckley wondered if Wumbalano knew, if he'd always known, that Buckley wasn't really Murrangurk. But it didn't matter anymore. He'd become Murrangurk, not by blood, by choice, by years, by the life he'd built. 32 years. That's how long it took for William Buckley to completely disappear, to become someone else, someone better, someone who belonged. By 1835, there was nothing left of the thief from Cheshire, only Murrangurk. Hunter, father, elder, ghost man. He was home. He was happy. He would have lived the rest of his life like this, if the white men hadn't returned. The Wathaurong saw them first. Ships. Not like the old ones from 32 years ago. These were different. Bigger. More of them. White sails on the horizon, coming closer. The runners brought news. White men landing at Indented Head, building shelters, setting up camp. The same white men who'd been here before, the ones who'd left. They were back. The camp erupted. Some wanted to fight, drive them away before they built more of those strange wooden houses. Others wanted to hide, move inland, avoid them entirely. The elders tried to calm everyone, but there was no precedent for this. The white ghosts had left once. Why would they come back? Buckley stood. "I will go," he said in Wathaurong. "I will see what they want." The crowd went quiet. Wumbalano, ancient now, leaning on a stick, looked at him with sharp eyes. "Why you?" Buckley struggled to find words. How could he explain? He barely remembered being one of them, the white men. That life was fog, dreams, something that happened to someone else. But some part of him knew their language, knew their ways. Maybe that knowledge could protect his people. "Because," he said slowly, "I speak ghost." Parwarn touched his arm. Her eyes said everything her mouth didn't. "Don't go. Stay. We need you here." But also, "Go. Protect us. Come back." Buckley touched her face, looked at his children, grown now, the oldest nearly a man. Then he picked up his spear. Murrangurk's spear. His spear. And walked toward the bay. He walked alone. The beach stretched before him. He knew every rock, every tide pool, every place the fish gathered. This was his land, his country, his home. And strangers were on it. He heard them before he saw them. English. The sound of it hit him like a physical thing, words he almost recognized, rhythms his mouth almost remembered. Buckley stopped walking. His chest hurt. His head hurt. The English words were doing something to his brain, pulling at memories he'd buried. Names, faces, a whole life he'd forgotten. London, Holland. Convict. Thief. The words came like hammer blows. He stood there, hand pressed to his forehead, as 32 years of forgotten English tried to surface all at once. It felt like drowning in reverse. He approached the edge of their camp. There were maybe 20 of them. Men in clothes that looked absurd to Buckley now. Tight pants, buttoned shirts, hats. How did they move in those things? They were building, cutting timber, setting up tents, making the same mistakes the Sullivan Bay settlement had made. Wrong location, wrong materials, wrong understanding of the land. One of them saw him, dropped his axe, pointed, screamed. "Savage!" The camp erupted into chaos. Men ran for muskets, others grabbed axes. One started loading a pistol with shaking hands. They saw what Buckley had become. A giant in possum skins. Long matted hair, beard to his chest. Skin weathered dark, carrying a 7-foot spear. A savage. A threat. Something to kill. Buckley raised his hands, held the spear high, the peace gesture. He opened his mouth, tried to speak. English. He knew English. He'd spoken it his whole life. But nothing came. His tongue wouldn't shape the sounds. His throat wouldn't make the words. The language was there, somewhere in his skull, but blocked, buried under 32 years of Wathaurong. No. Friend. Only broken sounds came out. Gibberish, animal noises. The settlers heard it as proof. Savage. Not human. One raised his musket. The barrel pointed at Buckley's heart. This was it. Survive 32 years in the wilderness. Raise a family. Become an elder. Just to be shot by white men who thought he was the enemy. "Hold your fire!" A man pushed through the crowd, older than the others, well-dressed. He lowered the musket barrel with one hand. "Let's not shoot anyone until we know what we're dealing with," he said calmly. This was John Batman, the leader, the one who'd purchased this land from the tribes, or thought he had. He approached Buckley, not close, but close enough, looked him up and down, took in the height, the spear, the possum skin cloak, the gray beard. His eyes caught on something, squinted. "What's that on your arm?" Buckley looked down. The tattoo. He'd forgotten about it, hadn't thought about it in years, decades. W.B. William Buckley. The mark from another life. Still there. Proof. He shoved his arm forward, pointed at the letters. "Look," he managed. One English word. "Look." Batman leaned closer, saw the tattoo. His eyes widened. That's English letters. How does a savage have—" Another man joined them, younger, educated-looking. Perhaps he encountered British sailors who marked him. Some tribes do adopt symbols from— Batman raised a hand. "Quiet." He stared into Buckley's face. Really looked. Those eyes. They're blue. Blue eyes. And the skin under all that weather. Christ, he's white. The realization spread through the group like fire. He's European. The settlers crowded closer, not threatening now, curious, amazed. Buckley felt his chest tightening. Too many of them, too close, their faces blurred together. White skin, English words, the smell of them, soap and gunpowder and sweat that smelled wrong. One of the younger men stepped forward, held something out. Bread. A piece of ship's bread, hard as stone, dry, probably months old, but bread.
The smell hit Buckley like a fist. Bread. England. London. The trial. The ship. Martin. Grandfather. Mother. Everything came back at once. Every English memory he'd buried. Every word. Every face. Every moment. His mouth moved. Tongue struggled. The English sounds felt foreign. Wrong. Like speaking with a broken jaw. But slowly. So slowly. Bread. Bread. The word came out clear. English. Perfect. The settlers gasped. Buckley pointed to himself. Fought through the blockage. The words were there. He just had to find them. I am... Batman leaned forward. Everyone leaned forward. I am... William... Yes? William what? William Buckley. The name felt strange in his mouth, like wearing shoes after decades barefoot. But it was his name. His old name. The settlers exploded. Impossible! The Sullivan Bay convict? He escaped in 2003. He's been alive? For 32 years? Batman stared at him, trying to process. You're William Buckley, the escaped convict from Colonel Collins' settlement. Buckley nodded. The movement felt wrong, too English. The Wathaurong didn't nod like that. Yes. I was convict. I ran. He struggled. I lived with them. He didn't have the English word anymore. The people. Here, people. Batman circled him slowly, taking in the whole picture. The spear, the cloak, the way Buckley stood, weight distributed differently than any Englishman. The way his eyes kept darting to the tree line, looking for threats. You've been living with the natives for 32 years. Yes. As one of them. I am one of them. The words hung in the air. Buckley realized what he'd said, what it meant. He wasn't William Buckley anymore. Not really. He was Murrangurk. Hunter. Father. Elder. But Murrangurk didn't speak English, didn't have a tattoo that said WB, didn't remember London. Batman gestured toward the camp. Come, sit. You must have quite a story. Buckley looked at the camp, the white men, the English words, the bread. Then he looked back toward the tree line, toward his people, his family, his real life. He stood between two worlds and realized with cold clarity that he couldn't return to either one completely. He walked into the camp. Not William Buckley, not Murrangurk. Something in between. Someone new. Someone broken. He sat with them, tried to answer their questions, tried to be William Buckley again. But the words came slow, broken, wrong, because William Buckley had died in the wilderness 32 years ago. And ghosts don't come back. Not really. Not whole. Batman wanted to know everything. Where he'd been, how he'd survived, what the natives were like, their numbers, their weapons, their territories. Buckley sat in a wooden chair, the first chair in 32 years, and tried to answer. But the words wouldn't come right. English felt like wearing clothes 3 sizes too small. Everything pinched, everything rubbed wrong. The people, they good. Hunt. Stories at night.
They teach me—" He was mixing languages without realizing. Wathaurong words slipping into English sentences. His hands moving in Wathaurong gestures Batman couldn't read. Batman frowned. "Please, slowly, in English." "I try. Is hard. Too long. Words gone." Another man entered, better dressed than the others, official-looking. He looked at Buckley like a specimen, something fascinating and horrible at once. "My God," he said, 32 years among savages. Your mind must be quite damaged." Buckley's jaw tightened. "Not damaged," he said, carefully. "Different. Of course, of course." The official smiled like you'd smile at a child. "But you're back among civilization now. We'll help you readjust." Buckley said nothing, just stared. These men looked at him and saw ruin, a white man destroyed by savagery. They couldn't see that he'd been remade into something better. They tried to make him English again, cut his hair. Just a trim. You can't walk around looking like a wild man. Gave him clothes. These trousers should fit, and a proper shirt. Offered him boots. Your feet must be destroyed. Let us— No. He wore the pants eventually, but kept the possum cloak, kept his feet bare. They thought he was being stubborn, damaged. He was being practical. Boots would cripple him. The cloak kept him warm in ways their thin jackets never could. But every compromise pulled him further from who he'd become. At night, he heard them calling. The Wathaurong, his people, from the tree line. "Murrangurk!" Not threatening, just calling. "Come home. Where are you? We miss you." Buckley stood at the edge of camp, staring into the darkness. He could go back, just walk away. The settlers couldn't stop him. But then what? A young settler approached. "Mr. Buckley, you shouldn't stand so close to the forest. The natives might—" "They won't hurt me." "How can you know that?" Buckley looked at him. "They are my family." The settler blinked, didn't understand, couldn't understand. How could a white man love savages more than his own kind? Batman called him to a meeting. More officials this time. Maps spread across a table. Plans. "Mr. Buckley," Batman began, "we need your help." They wanted to expand, build more settlements, bring more white people. "You know these natives, their language, their ways. You could help us negotiate. Make them understand we mean no harm." Buckley stared at the map, at the lines they'd drawn through Wathaurong country, through his country. "What do you offer them?" he asked quietly. Batman paused. "Well, protection, trade goods, tools, the benefits of civilization. Their land already theirs. What do you give for taking it?" An official spoke up. "We're bringing progress, civilization, saving them from their primitive—" Buckley's look silenced him. "They not need saving," Buckley said. "They know this land, how to live, what to eat, when to move. What you know? You build wrong place, cut wrong trees, die in winter like Sullivan Bay." Batman leaned forward. "That's exactly why we need you. To bridge both worlds, to prevent conflict, to help both peoples understand each other." It sounded reasonable, noble even. But Buckley had lived long enough to hear what wasn't being said. Help us take their land peacefully. That night, Buckley left camp. Not escaped, just left. He moved through the scrub the way he'd been taught. Silent,
reading the land, following paths only he could see. He found them an hour later. The Wathaurong camp was quiet, waiting. They'd heard him coming. When he stepped into the firelight, everyone stopped. Parworn stood, hand over her mouth, tears already streaming. His children stared. Their father looked wrong. Hair trimmed, English pants, smelling like white man's soap. Murrangurk? Parworn's voice was small, afraid. She touched his face, looked into his eyes, searching for the man she knew. Buckley took her hand. I'm here. I'm still here. But they both knew it was a lie. Wambalano emerged from a shelter, older, weaker, using a walking stick. He looked at Buckley's English pants, the trimmed hair, the smell. You wear their skin now, he said quietly, not an accusation, just truth. Buckley knelt. No, I am still Murrangurk. I am still your family. Wambalano touched his head, gentle, like blessing a child leaving home. You are Murrangurk, always. But Murrangurk walks between worlds now, cannot live in both, must choose. I choose here. I choose you. Wambalano smiled sadly. You already choose, or you not wear ghost clothes. Buckley looked down, at the pants, the trimmed hair. The old warrior was right. He'd already chosen, without meaning to, without wanting to. His son spoke, voice hard, adult. You left us. 3 words. True, undeniable. I didn't. I had to. They needed. You chose them. Buckley had no answer, because it was true. He'd walked into that camp, spoken their language, sat in their chairs. He could have stayed silent, could have walked away. But he'd chosen to be William Buckley again, and that choice had broken everything. Parworn touched his face one last time. You cannot stay, she said, not angry, just sad. White ghosts come more now. More ships, more people. They see you here, they think we keep you. They come with guns. I'll protect you. I'll make them understand. You cannot. You are one. They are many. And they see us as... She struggled for words. Not people. Not real. She was right. God, she was right. Every day in that camp, more English words returned, more Wathaurong words faded. His body was learning to sit in chairs again, to sleep on cots, to wake to bugles instead of birds. He was becoming William Buckley again, whether he wanted to or not. Wambalano spoke one last time. Go. Live with ghosts. But remember us. When they talk about savages, you tell them we were people. We loved our children. We knew the stars. We were real. His voice cracked. Make them know we were real. Buckley broke. Deep sobs tore from his chest. He held Wambalano, this man who'd saved him, taught him, loved him, and wept. I will, he choked out. I promise. I will. At dawn, he left. His family watched from the camp. Parworn held their children. Wambalano stood despite his age. No one tried to stop him. No one asked him to stay. Because they knew. He was already gone. Buckley walked back toward the settler camp. Not because he wanted to, because there was nowhere else to go. The Wathaurong couldn't keep him without endangering themselves. The English would keep coming whether he helped or not. He was caught between worlds, and the only way forward was to try to protect his people from inside the enemy's camp. Batman greeted him at the camp's edge. "Mr. Buckley, we were concerned. Where?" "I help you," Buckley said, hollow, empty. "I translate. I make peace. His voice failed. "I help." Batman smiled, clapped his shoulder. "Excellent. I knew you'd see reason." Buckley said nothing, just stared at the map on Batman's table, at the lines drawn through Wathaurong country, through his country he was now helping them take. The months that followed were slow death. Buckley stood between two worlds and watched both of them crumble. The settlers kept coming. More ships, more people, more demands for land. The Wadawurrung kept losing. Territory, hunting grounds, sacred places, and Buckley translated it all. "Mr. Batman offers blankets," Buckley would translate. "Tools, metal axes, good for hunting." The Wathaurong elders would look at him like he'd lost his mind. One of them, a man Buckley had hunted with, shared fires with, spoke quietly. "Tell the ghost chief we do not trade sky for blankets. Does he offer to trade his mother for an axe?" Buckley translated. "They say the offer is generous. They need time to consider." A lie. He was buying time, softening both sides, trying to prevent the inevitable. But Batman wasn't stupid. "Mr. Buckley," he said quietly after the Wathaurong left, "I need you to translate exactly what they say, not what you wish they'd say." Buckley said nothing. Because what could he say? "I'm trying to save my family from you?" The diseases came next. Smallpox, measles, influenza. Things the Europeans carried without knowing. Things the Wathaurong had no defense against. Buckley walked through the camp and saw death everywhere. Children burning with fever, elders coughing blood, bodies wrapped in bark, waiting for burial. Parworn lay in their shelter, burning with fever. Their youngest daughter beside her, just as sick. She looked at him with fever-bright eyes. "The ghosts bring death," she whispered. "We should have fought. Should have killed them all when they were few." "They would have sent more." "Then we die fighting. Not like this. Not—" She gestured weakly at the camp. "Not rotting." Buckley held her hand, said sorry over and over until the word lost meaning. She died 3 days later. Their daughter died the same night. Buckley buried them in the Wathaurong way, wrapped in bark, spears standing guard, and felt the last piece of Murrangurk die with them. Wambalano lasted longer, old and tough as the land itself, but even he couldn't outlast the tide. Buckley sat with him on his last night. The shelter was quiet. Most of the camp was gone, fled inland, died, or simply scattered. "I failed you," Buckley said in Wathaurong. "I couldn't protect them." Wambalano's laugh was dry as old leaves. "Cannot stop ocean with hands. Ghosts are ocean. We are sand. Then what do I do?" The old warrior gripped his arm. Surprising strength left in those ancient fingers. "Remember us. Tell true stories, not ghost stories about savages, real stories. We loved our children. We knew the stars. We sang. We laughed. We were people." His grip tightened. "You only one who can tell both worlds. You are bridge. Broken bridge, but bridge. Tell them. Make them know.
I will,
Buckley choked out.
I swear it.
Wombulano smiled, closed his eyes. Good. Then I taught you well. Murrangurk remembers. That is enough. He died before dawn. Buckley sat with the body until the sun rose. Then he buried his father. Buckley kept his promise. He told stories. Anyone who would listen. Settlers, officials, soldiers, sailors. He told them about Wombulano, about Parworn, about his children, about the hunts and the corroborees, and the way the Wathaurong knew every rock and tree. Some listened with curiosity, some with pity, some with contempt. But he told them anyway. In a pub once, a drunk settler laughed.
Tell us about the savages, Buckley. Did they really eat babies?
Buckley's fist hit the table, made everyone jump. They were not savages, he said quietly. They were people. Better people than you. Kinder, smarter about the land, braver. And they are gone because of men like you. The man shut up. They all did. Buckley's size helped. His scars helped. His eyes, haunted, ancient, dangerous, helped most of all. They feared him enough to listen. And he used that fear to make them remember. In 1837, a man named John Morgan asked to write Buckley's story. For posterity, Morgan said, your experiences are unique, invaluable. They should be preserved. Buckley was suspicious, but tired, and this was a chance to tell it all, properly. They sat for weeks. Buckley talked, Morgan wrote. He told it all. England, the theft, the trial, the escape, the spear, Wombulano, Parworn, the children, the corroborees, the languages, the hunts, the love, the loss. When Morgan published it, he changed things, made it more civilized, removed the parts that made white settlers look bad, added Christian redemption that never happened. But the core was there, the witness, the truth. The Wathaurong were real, and now it was in a book, permanent. Wombulano would have been proud. Buckley left Port Phillip eventually. Too many ghosts, too much memory. He went to Van Diemen's Land, the place he'd been running from in 1803. The irony wasn't lost on him. He worked as a laborer, loading ships, simple work, mindless. At night he sat alone and spoke to no one. He practiced Wathaurong in the darkness, spoke it to himself, to the fire, to ghosts. If he forgot, no one would remember. The language would die. He was the last speaker, the last memory, the last bridge. And he was 76 years old. The bridge wouldn't last much longer. In 1856, the government gave him a pension for services to the colony in negotiating with the native population. £30 a year, enough to live on, barely. Buckley took it, not because he was grateful, but because he was tired. Too tired to refuse, too tired to fight, too tired to care. He died in a small room in Hobart, January 30th, 1856, 76 years old. 53 years since the escape. No family at his bedside, no Wathaurong elders, no children, no Parworn. Just a landlady who found him the next morning. But in those last moments, before the darkness, he wasn't in Hobart. He was in the camp, by the fire. Wombulano was telling stories. Parworn was singing. His children were laughing. He was Murrangurk again. He was home. They remember him now, not the way he'd want. They call him Buckley's Chance, Australian slang for no chance at all. They tell his story as survival,
adventure, the wild white man who lived with savages. They miss the point. The museums tell it wrong, make it exotic, fascinating, a curiosity. They don't understand. He didn't survive 32 years. He lived them, loved them, lost them. Sometimes Aboriginal kids visit the museum, see the displays, read about their ancestors. They understand what the others don't. This isn't a story about a white man's adventure. It's a story about their people, their land, their loss, and one white man who loved them enough to witness their ending. The Wathaurong language nearly died, but not completely. Descendants kept pieces, remembered fragments, fought to rebuild what was taken. And
some of what they know because Buckley remembered, because he kept speaking it in the darkness, alone. The last bridge, broken, but standing. The land remembers. Port Phillip Bay still crashes on the same shores. The tea tree still grows. The eucalyptus still smells of home. And somewhere in that land, beneath the cities and the roads and the civilization, the Wadawurrung still walk. In memory, in story, in the words of descendants who refuse to be erased. Wambalano's voice echoes through time. Tell them we were real. And Buckley did. He told them. We remember. William Buckley, 1780 to 1856, Murrangurk. The White Savage, the Wild White Man, the Last Bridge. He lived, he loved, he remembered, and so do we.